The next morning, without telling his mother, Ekena made a decision. He picked up his father's toolbox, the one thing of value they still owned. Emeka had been skilled with his hands and had collected these tools over many years. He had taught Ekena how to use each one, showed him how to fix things around their small house. The toolbox was like having a piece of his father still with them, but sentimentality wouldn't pay the rent or buy food. Ekena decided to walk to the market town 10 kilometers away, where he might get a better price for the tools than in their small village. "I'm going to visit my friend," he told his mother that morning. "I'll be back before dark." Chisholm was busy packing their few belongings into bundles and didn't question him too closely. The walk to the market town was long under the hot sun. Ekena's stomach growled with hunger. They had all been eating less to make their food stretch further. The toolbox grew heavy in his hands, but he kept going. If he could get enough money for these tools, maybe they could stay together for just one more month. Maybe in that time, his mother could find work. When he finally reached the busy market, he looked around for someone who might want to buy tools. He spotted a small stall where a man was fixing radios and other electronics. Perfect. Someone like that would understand the value of good tools. Ekena approached the stall, gathering all his courage. The man looked up from the radio he was repairing. "Sir, I wish to sell these tools," Ekena said, trying to sound more confident than he felt as he placed the worn leather case on the wooden counter. The man looked at Ekena for a moment, noting his dusty clothes and thin frame. Then he opened the case and examined the contents with obvious interest. His fingers moved over the screwdrivers, pliers, and other tools with the appreciation of someone who understood their worth. "These are quality tools," he remarked, picking up a particularly well-maintained screwdriver. "Where did you get them?" Ekena swallowed hard. "They belonged to my father," he replied, blinking rapidly to keep tears from falling. "He wouldn't cry here in the market like a small child. He taught me how to use each one." Something in Ekena's voice made the man look up sharply. "Your father is no longer with us?" he asked gently. Ekena could only shake his head at first. Then, finding his voice, he said, "He died in the bottling factory bus accident 6 months ago." The words hung in the air between them. Ekena waited for the man to start bargaining, to offer him a price for the toolbox. Instead, the man's expression changed completely. He stared at Ekena like he had seen a ghost. The man's face suddenly turned pale. He stared at Ekena with wide eyes, like he had just seen something impossible. His hands actually started shaking a little. "What was your father's name?" he asked, his voice not much more than a whisper. "Emeka Eke," Ekena replied, confused by the man's reaction. "He was a supervisor at the factory." The man slowly lowered himself onto his wooden stool, still clutching the screwdriver from the toolbox. He looked like he needed to sit down before his legs gave out. "Emeka Eke," he repeated, saying the name carefully like he was making sure he heard it right. "Tall man? With a small scar above his right eyebrow?" Ekena felt a jolt of surprise. "Yes, that's exactly right. His father did have that scar, from an accident when he was younger. How did this stranger know such a specific detail?" "My name is Obinanjoku," the man said, and Ekena could hear that his voice wasn't steady anymore. "Your father saved my life." Now it was Ekena's turn to stare in complete disbelief. His mouth actually fell open. Of all the people he could have met at this market, of all the stalls he could have approached, could this really be happening? The bus accident. Obina continued, his eyes now looking somewhere far away, like he was seeing it all happen again. "I was one of 3 workers he helped escape through the window before—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The memory seemed too painful for him to put into words. "We tried to find his family afterward," Obina went on after taking a deep breath. "But no one at the factory knew exactly where you lived. They just said his family was from a small village, but didn't know which one." Ekena was having trouble processing all this. This man had been there? Had seen his father in those final moments? Had been saved by him? It felt like his father was suddenly closer somehow, like a part of the story Ekena hadn't known was finally being told. With trembling hands, Ekena reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. It was creased from being folded and unfolded many times. The picture showed Chisholm with all 4 children, taken at Christmas the year before the accident. It was the last family photo they had. "This is my mother and my siblings," Ikenna said, his voice cracking a little as he handed over the photo. "We're about to be separated because we can't afford our rent. That's why I'm selling Papa's tools." Obinna took the photograph carefully, as if it was something precious and fragile. He studied the faces in the picture, the tired but smiling mother, the serious-looking older boy who must be Ikenna himself, the identical twin girls, and the small boy with the gap-toothed smile. His eyes lingered on each face. Then he looked up at Ikenna, and there was something new in his expression, a firmness, a decision that hadn't been there before. "No," he said with surprising force, "you will not sell these tools." He placed the screwdriver back in the toolbox and closed it firmly. "And you will not be separated," he added, standing up from his stool. There was absolute determination in his voice now. Ikenna was confused. What did this man mean? He needed the money from selling the tools. That was the whole reason he had walked all this way. "But sir, we need the money," Ikenna tried to explain. "My mother is sick. We can't pay our rent. My uncle in Owerri will take me, and my aunt will take my sisters, but—" Obinna held up his hand, stopping Ikenna mid-sentence. "Your father pushed me through the bus window before going back to help others," he said, looking directly into Ikenna's eyes. "He could have saved himself, but instead he saved me, a man he barely knew. I have carried that debt for 6 months, not knowing how to repay it." He picked up the toolbox and handed it back to Ikenna. "Now I know," he said simply. "This is no accident that you came to my stall today with these tools. This is God's doing." Ikenna took back the toolbox, still not understanding what was happening. "Please, take me to your mother," Obinna said, already starting to pack up his repair tools and close his stall for the day. "I need to speak with her immediately." "But it's 10 kilometers to our village," Ikenna said. "Then we better start walking," Obinna replied, locking up his stall. "Or wait, my friend has a motorcycle. We can borrow it." Ikenna stood there, stunned, as Obinna quickly made arrangements with the man at the next stall. Everything was happening so fast. Just an hour ago, he had been prepared to sell his father's tools out of desperation. Now, this stranger, this man whose life his father had saved, was insisting on coming back to their village. What would his mother say? What did this mean for their family? For the first time in months, Ikenna felt something that had been missing since his father's death. A small, fragile spark of hope. Back at the small house, Chisholm was stirring a pot of thin, watery soup with just a few pieces of vegetables floating in it. It was all they had left. Tomorrow, they would start packing for their separate journeys. The twins were sitting quietly in the corner, not even playing their usual games. They hadn't smiled much since learning they would be sent to their aunt's house. Suddenly, the door burst open with such force that Chisholm jumped, nearly dropping the wooden spoon. Ikenna rushed in, out of breath, and with an excitement in his eyes that she hadn't seen in months. "Mama! Mama!" he shouted, his words coming out between deep breaths. "This is Mr. Obinna Njoku. Papa saved him from the bus." Behind Ikenna stood a middle-aged man carrying Emeka's toolbox. The stranger looked almost as excited as Ikenna, though more controlled. He had kind eyes and wore the simple clothes of a working man. Chisholm was confused. "What? Who? Ikenna, what are you talking about?" The twins and little Chidi crowded around, staring at the stranger with curiosity. "Your son brought me here to meet you," the man said, stepping forward. "My name is Obinna Njoku. I worked at the bottling factory with your husband." "He was on the bus when it crashed, Mama," Ikenna interrupted, unable to contain himself. "Papa pushed him through the window before going back for others." Chisholm felt her legs go weak and sat down on the small wooden stool by the cooking fire. You were there?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Obinna nodded. "Your husband gave his life saving mine and 2 others. For 6 months, I've been trying to find his family to thank them, to help somehow. But the factory had no address for you, only that you lived in a small village. And you found us because I went to sell Papa's tools at his stall," Ikenna added, still amazed by this turn of events. Chisholm looked at the pot of thin soup, embarrassed that she had nothing proper to offer a guest. But without hesitation, She invited Obinna to share their small meal. He accepted graciously, seeming to understand the significance of the gesture. As they ate, Obinna told them the full story. He had been sitting near the back of the bus that day, dozing after the long shift, when he was jolted awake by screaming and the sensation of falling. The bus had gone off the bridge and was filling with water. People were panicking, pushing each other. The doors were jammed shut. Then your husband, he was so calm, he started breaking windows and helping people out. He pushed me through a window when my leg was trapped under a seat. I begged him to come too, but he said there were others still inside. The family listened in silent awe. This was something they hadn't known, the exact way Emeka had died. It was painful to hear, but also strangely comforting. He had died as he had lived, thinking of others. After I recovered, I used the insurance money to start my repair business, Obinna continued. But I've never stopped looking for Emeka's family. I owe him everything. He looked around at their sparse home, at the children's thin faces, at the nearly empty pot. Your husband gave me a second chance at life, he told Chisholm, his voice firm with conviction. Now, let me help give you one. Chisholm didn't know what to say. They had been struggling for so long, trying to make it on their own. Could she accept help from this stranger? But then, he wasn't really a stranger, was he? He was connected to them by Emeka's final act of bravery. The next morning, Obinna returned as promised. This time he brought his wife, Ada, a warm, practical woman with quick hands and a ready smile. They had been talking all night, Obinna explained, about how they could help Emeka's family. My brother-in-law owns several stalls in the market town, Obinna told Chisholm. He's expanding his business to another town and needs someone trustworthy to manage his fabric shop here. Chisholm shook her head doubtfully. I know nothing about running a shop. You can learn, Ada said confidently. And I need help with my tailoring business. I've seen you're wearing a dress you made yourself. You have good stitching skills. I can teach you more. Obinna added the most important part. The position comes with rooms behind the shop. You and all your children could live there. Chisholm looked at Ikenna, who was nodding eagerly. Then at the twins, who were holding hands and looking hopeful for the first time in days. Finally at little Chidi, who was smiling that gap-toothed smile that reminded her so much of Emeka. You would do this for us? She asked, still not quite believing it. Your husband didn't stop to think whether I was worth saving, Obinna said simply. He just did what was right. Now, it's my turn. 2 weeks later, after frantic packing and tearful goodbyes to neighbors who had helped them through hard times, Chisholm and her 4 children moved into the rooms behind the fabric shop in the market town. The space was small but clean, 2 rooms with an area for cooking at the back. It felt like a palace compared to what they had almost been forced to accept. Chisholm worked hard learning both businesses, managing the fabric shop during the day and helping Ada with tailoring in the evenings. The hours were long and the work was challenging, but unlike her previous desperate efforts, this work came with fair pay and dignity. Best of all, for the first time since Emeka's death, she could afford to keep all 4 children together and in school. Watching them walk off together each morning in their uniforms, Ikenna protectively shepherding his younger siblings, Chisholm felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The thread connecting them to Emeka hadn't been broken after all. In a way Chisholm could never have imagined, it had become stronger, extending beyond death to weave a new beginning for them all. Almost a year had gone by since Chisholm and her children moved behind the fabric shop. Life was much better now than during those hard times after Emeka died. Chisholm had gotten really good at sewing. She learned fast under Ada's teaching. Her regular stitching was neat, but her embroidery work, the fancy decorative stitching, was what people really noticed. She could make flowers and patterns that looked almost real on the cloth. Mama, Mrs. Nkichi wants you specially to do the embroidery for her daughter's wedding clothes, Ngozi told her one day, looking proud as she gave this message. That's the 3rd big order this week, Chisholm said with a smile as she put thread through her needle. The twins were doing better in school now that they weren't worried all the time. Little Chidi played with neighborhood kids and laughed a lot. And Ikenna, now 15 and getting tall like his father, split his time between school and helping Obinna fix things at the repair shop. One Wednesday evening, Chisholm was closing the shop by pulling down the metal shutters when a nice black car stopped in front of the store. It wasn't flashy like Uzoma's car had been, but it was clean and good quality. A man got out. He was tall with clean, neat clothes. Chisholm felt a little nervous. Well-dressed strangers often meant trouble. "Excuse me," the man called out as he walked toward her. "I'm looking for someone." As he got closer, Chisholm saw he was holding something, a handkerchief with the flower pattern she had made last month. She knew every stitch on it. "I'm looking for the woman who made this embroidery," he said, holding it up. "That's mine," Chisholm said quietly, wondering if there was something wrong with her work. "Is there a problem with it?" The man smiled big. "A problem? No, it's perfect. My name is Kelechi Okafor. I own a clothing shop in Port Harcourt that sells traditional clothes with modern styles. Your work is exactly what I need." Chisholm stared at him, confused. "My embroidery?" "Yes," Kelechi nodded eagerly. "One of my customers bought this in the market and showed it to me. I've been looking everywhere for someone who can make patterns like this. Your style mixes old methods with new ideas. That's what my customers want." They talked as it got dark outside. Kelechi wanted her to make embroidery designs for his expensive clothes. He mentioned paying her more money than she made in a whole month at the fabric shop. "Would you like to come inside for some water?" Chisholm finally remembered to ask. "It's getting dark." Kelechi followed her into their small living space where the twins were helping Chidi with his homework. They looked up with curious faces. While Chisholm poured water from their clay pot into a cup, Kelechi looked around the simple room. His eyes stopped at the framed photo on the wall, the only decoration they had. It showed Emeka at church the year before the accident. Kelechi suddenly froze, the cup halfway to his mouth. "That man," he said, pointing to the photo, his voice sounding strange. "Who is he?" His tone made everyone look up. "My late husband, Emeka Eke," Chisholm answered, wondering why he asked. The man's eyes got very big. "Emeka Eke, from the bottling factory in Aba?" Before Chisholm could ask how he knew this, the door opened and Obinna walked in with Ikenna, both dusty from working at the repair shop. Obinna stopped when he saw their visitor. For a moment, he just stared with his mouth open. Then, with a loud shout that made everyone jump, he rushed forward. "Kelechi! Brother! What are you doing here?" Obinna and Kelechi held each other tight, tears in their eyes as they embraced. The children watched with wide eyes, not understanding what was happening. Chisholm stood frozen, her heart beating fast as she watched these two grown men crying and laughing at the same time. When they finally let go, both men wiped their eyes with the backs of their hands. The room was quiet, except for their heavy breathing. Everyone was waiting for an explanation. Obinna turned to face Chisholm and the children, his face glowing with happiness. "This is Kelechi," he said, his voice shaking a little. "He's the second person Emeka saved from the bus accident." Chisholm felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "And there was a third man, too," Obinna continued. "David. He works at the bank in Aba now." The twins looked at each other with big eyes. Little Chidi moved closer to his mother, sensing something important was happening. Ikenna stood tall, his face serious as he took in this news about his father. "All this time?" Chisholm whispered. "All this time there were two more people he saved?" Kelechi nodded, still unable to speak properly. He kept looking at Emeka's picture on the wall, then back at the children, seeing their father in their faces. Soon, Obinna's wife Ada arrived, surprised to find a stranger in their home. But when Obinna explained who Kelechi was, she immediately started preparing food. This was a night for a special meal, even if they only had simple ingredients. As they sat around the small table eating cassava and fish stew, Kelechi's story came out, bit by bit. After the accident, he had spent weeks in the hospital with broken bones. The insurance company had paid him some money, not much, but enough to start a small clothing shop. "At first, I just sold whatever I could get," Kelechi explained, using his hands to show how small his first shop was. "But then, I noticed people really liked traditional clothes with modern touches, so I focused on that. The business grew slowly but steadily. Now he had a proper boutique in Port Harcourt, with 5 people working for him. All because he survived that day." "I kept asking about Emeka's family," Kelechi said, looking at Chisholm. "But the factory people wouldn't give information. They said it was against their rules." Chisom shook her head, thinking about all those months of struggling, not knowing these connections existed. Kelechi reached into his pocket and pulled out the handkerchief with Chisom's embroidery. He spread it carefully on the table like it was made of gold. "Last week, a woman came to my shop wearing this. I asked where she got it, and she told me about a market stall with beautiful embroidery. I had to find the person who made it for my business. I never imagined—" His voice broke. He took a deep breath. "It's not just chance," Kelechi said firmly, looking around at them all. "It's God's way of completing what Emeka started. His final act of kindness is still working, bringing us together to help each other." The twins nodded, understanding perfectly. Even at their age, they could see how strange and wonderful this connection was. After the meal, the children went to sleep, buzzing with excitement about the day's events. The adults stayed up late, sharing stories about Emeka. Chisom learned new things about her husband, how calm he'd been during the accident, how he'd organized people when everyone was panicking, how he'd gone back into the sinking bus to help others when he could have saved himself. By the time they finished talking, it was well past midnight. Kelechi refused to drive back to his hotel in the dark. He slept on a mat in the main room, looking happier than a man sleeping on the floor should be. Morning came with new energy. After a quick breakfast, Kelechi announced that they needed to go to Abba. "We have to see David," he said. "He's been waiting for this moment too." Chisom felt nervous about leaving the shop closed, but Obinna's wife promised to watch it. This was too important to miss. Obinna closed his repair business for the day too, something he never did. They squeezed into Kelechi's car, Chisom in front, Obinna in back, with Ikenna, who insisted on coming. The other children stayed with Ada, though they complained about missing out. The drive to Aba took over an hour on bumpy roads. Chisom hadn't been back to the city since Emeka's funeral. Too many sad memories. But today felt different, like she was following a path that had been waiting for her. The bank was a big building in the center of town. When they walked in, cool air hit their faces. Everything was clean and shiny. People in nice clothes moved around looking busy and important. Chisom felt out of place in her simple dress. Kelechi seemed to know where to go. He spoke to a security man who nodded and made a phone call. Minutes later, a man in a neat suit came hurrying across the marble floor. "Kelechi!" he called out. Then he saw Obinna and stopped walking. "Obinna? Is it really you?" The men hugged, causing people in the bank to stare. But they didn't care. David looked at Chisom with questioning eyes. "This is Emeka's wife," Kelechi said, "and this is his eldest son, Ikenna." David's face changed. He reached out slowly and took Chisom's hands in his. "I have been praying to meet you," he said quietly, "every day since the accident." He led them to a private office with a desk and comfortable chairs. Once the door closed, David told his story. Like the others, he had been saved by Emeka's quick thinking. He had used his insurance money to get more education, which helped him get this job at the bank. "But I couldn't just move on with my life," David said, leaning forward in his chair. "Not when I knew there were families suffering. The factory never did right by the people who died." He explained how he had been working with lawyers and other survivors to force the company to pay proper compensation. It had taken almost 2 years of fighting, but they were finally making progress. "There's a settlement being arranged," David said, looking straight at Chisom. "As Emeka's widow, you're entitled to a significant payment, especially since he died saving others." Chisom couldn't speak. Her mind was racing, thinking about what this could mean for her children's future. "When will this happen?" Obinna asked. "The final papers will be signed next month," David replied. "I've kept a file with all the family's information, but Emeka's was incomplete. Now I can fill in the missing details." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder with Emeka's name on it. With careful hands, he wrote down Chisom's information, each pen stroke bringing her family closer to security. As they left the bank, Chisom felt like she was dreaming. The sun was bright overhead, the street noisy with people and cars. But inside she felt quiet and peaceful. Ikenna walked beside her, taller than ever, looking so much like his father. "Papa is still taking care of us," he said simply, and Chisom knew it was true. The circle that started with Emeka's sacrifice was finally complete. His last act of bravery had set in motion waves that were coming back to lift up his family when they needed it most. The settlement money from the factory arrived 3 months after that day at the bank. Chisholm couldn't believe her eyes when David handed her the check. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Her hands actually shook as she held the paper. "This won't bring Emeka back," David said gently, "but at least it will help your family have the future he wanted for you." Chisholm nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. She remembered all those nights of despair when she'd wondered how she would feed her children the next day. The memory of Uzoma's ugly threats came back to her too. How different things were now. The first thing Chisholm did with the money was buy a small but proper house in the market town. It had 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen with a gas stove instead of firewood, and most wonderful of all, running water that came right out of a tap. The children couldn't stop turning the faucet on and off that first day, amazed that water appeared like magic. "Mama, look! Turn it on! Turn it off!" little Chidi kept saying, his face bright with wonder. But the best part of the house wasn't the walls or the water. It was hearing her children laugh inside it. The twins had space to play without being scolded for making noise. Ikenna had his own small desk by the window where he could study without distractions, and Chisholm had a room just for sewing, with good light and space to spread out her materials. Life got busy in a good way. Chisholm's embroidery work for Kelechi's boutique became so popular that he paid her extra for each piece. People started asking for her by name. "I need the flowers that Chisholm makes," customers would insist at Kelechi's shop in Port Harcourt. "No one else does them the same way." She still managed the fabric shop too, which gave her a steady weekly income. Between these jobs and the settlement, money safely kept in the bank, Chisholm could now afford things that once seemed impossible. Good food every day, proper school uniforms, medicine when someone got sick, and even small treats like ice cream on Sundays. The biggest change was in the children's education. Chisholm moved them to better schools where the classrooms weren't overcrowded, and the teachers showed up every day. She bought all the books they needed instead of making them share with other students. "Mama, look at my math test," Ngozi said one day, proudly showing a paper marked with a big A. Her twin sister Neka had gotten an A too. They had always been smart girls, but now they had the chance to really show it. Ikenna, now 16, was top of his class. His teachers said he had a special talent for engineering and should definitely go to university. When Chisholm heard this, she couldn't help thinking how proud Emeka would have been. He had always said education was the most important thing he could give his children. Nearly 2 years passed since Emeka's death. The sharp pain of loss had softened into something Chisholm could carry without being crushed by it. She still missed him terribly, especially in quiet moments at night, but she had found a way to keep living. One evening, Obinna, Kelechi, and David came to her house for dinner. They often got together like this, these 3 men whose lives were tied to hers through Emeka's final act. After the meal, when the children were playing in the yard, the men shared their new idea. "We've been talking," Obinna started, looking serious, "about how to honor Emeka's memory in a bigger way." David nodded. "Each of us owes our lives to him. And now we're all doing well because of that second chance. So we want to create something meaningful," Kelechi continued, "something that would make him proud." They explained their plan, the Emeka Eke Memorial Scholarship for children who had lost parents. Each of the 3 men would contribute money every year to help these children stay in school. "And we want Ikenna to help choose who gets the scholarships," Obinna added. "He knows better than anyone what these children are going through." Chisholm looked at these 3 men, once strangers, now like brothers to her, and felt overwhelmed by their goodness. This was Emeka's real legacy, she thought, not just saving lives that day, but starting a chain of kindness that kept growing. The first group of scholarship recipients included 5 children from different villages. Ikenna took his role in selecting them very seriously. He spent hours reading their stories and looking at their school records. "This boy reminds me of me, Mama," he said, pointing to one application. "See how he's trying to take care of his little sisters? And this girl, she walks 5 miles to school every day because she promised her dead father she would become a doctor." Chisholm watched her son's face as he talked about these children. He had the same compassion that had made Emeka go back into that sinking bus to save others. The thought warmed her heart. The scholarship program grew quickly. Word spread, and other business people in the area started contributing. By the end of the first year, they had enough money to help 12 children instead of 5. On the 3rd anniversary of the accident, Chisholm woke up feeling strange. 3 years, it seemed both very long and very short. She dressed carefully in a blue dress that Emeka had always liked and gathered the children to visit his grave. Obinna, Kelechi, and David met them there, each carrying small bunches of flowers. The cemetery was quiet that morning, with just the sounds of birds and distant traffic. Emeka's grave was simple, a mound of earth with a wooden cross bearing his name. Chisholm had planted flowers around it that were now blooming bright yellow and purple. They stood in a circle around the grave. No one spoke for a long time. What was there to say that hadn't been said? Each person was lost in their own thoughts and memories. Then little Chidi, now 9 years old, broke the silence. He tugged at Obinna's hand to get his attention. "Uncle Obinna," he asked in his clear child's voice, "if my papa hadn't pushed you out of the window, would you still have your repair shop?" Everyone looked at Chidi, surprised by the question. Obinna seemed struck by it. He knelt down slowly until he was eye level with the boy, his knee pressing into the soft cemetery ground. "No, Chidi," he answered honestly, his voice gentle but serious. "Without your father, many things would not exist. My shop, Kelechi's boutique, David's fund for families." He placed his big hand on Chidi's small shoulder. "And most importantly, we wouldn't have you and your family in our lives." Chidi nodded, taking this in. Then he smiled, a smile so much like Emeka's that it made Chisholm's stop and catch her breath. The twins moved closer to their mother, holding her arms. Ekena stood tall and straight beside David, looking more like a man than a boy now. As they walked back to their cars, Chisholm thought about how much had changed in 3 years. From the darkest time of her life had come this strange new family, not connected by blood, but by something just as strong: her husband's courage and the lives it had touched. Emeka's legacy wasn't just the money that had made their lives easier, or even the scholarship program helping other children. It was this circle of people who looked out for each other, who remembered every day that life was precious, and that kindness could echo for years in ways you might never expect.